They said kings were born with destiny in their blood, but when this child entered the world, even the midwives trembled. His cries echoed like an omen through the marble halls of the royal palace. The queen, pale and shaking, could not bear to look upon him. His limbs were twisted, his spine curved sharply, and one of his eyes appeared almost white, like a pearl under a stormy sky. To the priests, this was not a prince, it was a punishment. "He bears the mark of evil," one whispered, crossing himself in fear. His father, King Aldrich IV, a man of war and pride, stood frozen. This was not the heir he had imagined. He turned away and gave a command that would shape the child's entire life. "Hide him!" And so the prince was locked away from the world before he even learned to speak. The boy's name was Lucian. He grew up behind stone walls, unseen and unspoken of, fed by servants who dared not meet his gaze. They called him the creature in the tower. At night, they whispered tales that the boy talked to shadows, that candles flickered when he grew angry, that he could see in the dark. None of it was true, but Lucian learned quickly that sometimes fear was more powerful than truth. In his isolation, he turned to the only friends he had: books. He read everything he could find: histories of kings and empires, stories of betrayal and conquest, the philosophy of power. His mind became sharper than any blade his father had ever carried. Every cruel whisper hardened him. Every insult carved a new layer of patience and control. He began to believe that his deformity was not a curse, but a disguise, one that hid the mind of a ruler no one expected. When King Aldrich died in battle, chaos consumed the land. Nobles fought for control, ministers plotted behind closed doors, and the royal council faced a choice: allow the kingdom to crumble or summon the hidden heir. And so, after 2 decades in the dark, Lucian was brought out into the light. When he stepped into the grand hall for the first time, the courtiers fell silent. The sight was shocking. A man limping forward with a crooked back, his face partly veiled, his movements deliberate yet fragile. "That?" one noble spat. "That's the heir?" Another crossed himself, whispering, "God save us! He's not a man, he's a demon." Lucian said nothing. He looked at them with a cold, steady calm that froze the air around him. His pale eyes moved from one face to another, and for a moment, even the bravest men lowered their gaze. In the days that followed, the whispers turned into fear. The loudest critics of Lucian's claim fell sick without reason. One was found dead in his sleep, his face frozen in horror. Another vanished during the night, leaving behind only his blood-soaked cloak. The palace guards claimed to see strange shadows following the prince down the corridors, as if the darkness itself moved when he did. Soon, no one dared to challenge him. The council bowed, the nobles knelt, and the creature in the tower became the king on the throne. Lucien's coronation was held under candlelight. No trumpets, no celebration, only silence. As the crown touched his head, he whispered, "They will not mock me again." His reign began with both fear and brilliance. The kingdom, long decayed by corruption and war, began to change. Roads were repaired, taxes eased, and trade flourished. Crime nearly vanished, though no one dared to ask how. Those who stole were never seen again. Those who lied found their tongues missing. The people called him the Demon King, yet they could not deny his miracles. Crops grew taller, storms struck only his enemies, and the land seemed to obey him. The priests warned that darkness cannot rule forever, but their warnings faded. One by one, each disappeared after preaching against him. Lucian rarely spoke. But when he did, even the air seemed to listen. His deformity, once his shame, became his crown. He understood what others didn't, that fear was stronger than love, and respect born from terror lasted longer than devotion born from kindness. Still, behind the coldness, the boy who once cried alone in the dark remained. On quiet nights, when the torches dimmed and the palace slept, Lucian sat by his mirror, staring at the reflection he once hated. Would they still obey me, he whispered, if I looked like them? But he already knew the answer. His curse had become his weapon, and his isolation his kingdom. What began as a tragedy was turning into legend. Yet deep inside, Lucian felt it. The shadows that served him were growing stronger, and soon they would want something in return. Years passed, and the kingdom flourished under the reign of the man they still called the Demon King. Villages, once empty, were now alive with trade. Fields bloomed with abundance, and thieves had vanished as if swallowed by the earth. But the peace came with a strange stillness, a silence that hung heavy in every street. People whispered that the king could hear every secret spoken in his realm, that walls themselves listened for him. None dared to test the rumor. His rule was absolute, and though the kingdom was prosperous, no one celebrated. Even joy had learned to fear him. Inside his grand palace, Lucian lived surrounded by luxury, yet utterly alone. He had no queen, no children, no companions save for scholars and advisers who trembled in his presence. The nobles who dined at his table laughed only when he did, and even then, their laughter sounded rehearsed. The king's deformities had worsened with age. His back bent lower, his hands trembled slightly, and yet his mind seemed only sharper. Some said he no longer slept. His chambers glowed with candles long past midnight, and faint murmurs could be heard from behind his doors. The servants swore they heard two voices speaking, one his and one not quite human. It was during one of those nights that the palace physician found him standing before a mirror, whispering to his own reflection. "Why do they fear me?" Lucian asked softly. "Because they think you are a demon," the reflection replied. The physician, pale as snow, swore that he saw the king's reflection smile even when the king himself did not. Terrified, he resigned the next morning and fled the city before dawn. Lucian never mentioned it, but after that night, mirrors were removed from the entire palace. As the years rolled on, the legend of the Demon King grew. Some said he could summon storms at will. Others claimed he walked the castle at night with a torch that never burned out. His enemies, whether foreign lords or local rebels, always met strange fates. Ships vanished in calm seas, generals died without wounds, cities caught fire without flame. Lucian's power seemed divine, or damned. But even kings cannot escape the slow rot of time. His health began to falter, and with it, the old fears returned to the court. Ministers whispered of succession. The church, boldened by his weakness, began to call him the Cursed One. In distant villages, peasants stopped praying for him. They prayed against him. One autumn evening, the castle bells tolled at an hour they never had before. The king had summoned every noble and priest to his hall. As they gathered under the flickering torchlight, they found him seated on the throne, pale as wax, his body draped in black silk. "You call me a demon," he said in a low voice that carried through the vast hall. "But tell me, what makes a demon? Is it how one looks, or how one rules?" His words silenced them, yet his gaze burned through every man present. If fear built this kingdom, then fear shall guard it. for I am what you made me." And then, without another word, he rose, slowly, painfully, and walked down from the dais. The torches dimmed as he passed, and some swore they saw the shadows follow him like loyal servants. That night, thunder struck though the skies were clear. When dawn came, the king's chamber was empty. No one ever saw Lucian again. The guards at his door claimed they had fallen asleep, something that had never happened before. The door was still locked, the windows still sealed. Only the crown remained upon the floor, resting beside a single page torn from one of his books. It read, "They feared the monster they made, and so the monster became the king they deserved after his disappearance. The palace was abandoned. Those who entered it spoke of whispers echoing through the halls, of footsteps following them, of candles lighting themselves. Centuries later, travelers still point to the ruined castle and say that on stormy nights you can see a figure limping along the old battlements, carrying a torch that never dies. Some say it's the wind, others know better, and so history forgot King Lucian's name, but not his legend. The chronicles speak of prosperity born from terror, of a ruler who turned his curse into a crown. His story became a warning that fear may build empires, but it also devours them. The people called him a demon, yet perhaps he was only a man, twisted by rejection, sharpened by cruelty, and shaped by the darkness he was forced to live in. For when the world treats you like a monster long enough, you begin to believe it. And once you believe it, you become it.